depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she'd have to sleep in the office. So work hard, like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
I think of these things as just there's a certain amount of time, and within that time you want the best net outcome. So for all the set of actions that you can do, there's going to be some of which will fail, some of which will succeed, and you want the net useful output of your set of actions to be the highest. I have to use a baseball analogy. Baseball, they don't let you just sit there and wait for the perfect pitch until you get a real easy one. They can give you 3 shots, and on the third one, they say, okay, and they get off they go back to put somebody else up there. So your 3 strikes on baseball, not on bat anymore. So what you're really looking for is what's the batting average? How you doing on score, and just there's going to be some amount of failure, but you want your net output, net useful output to be maximized. Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic.
Don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort, but if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method.
We need to push for radical breakthroughs. And if you don't push for radical breakthroughs, you're not going to get radical outcomes. And that does mean taking risks. And common sense that if you take a big risk, in order to have a big reward, there must be a big risk. Most of the time you cannot find big reward for small risk. Those are rare. So you're going to have some proportionality with the risk and reward.
Simplify your product as much as possible. And then if I think of some of the ways in which, how does a smart engineer make dumb mistakes, is optimize something that shouldn't exist. Don't optimize something that shouldn't exist. But people are trained to do this in college. You can't say no to the professor. The professor's going to give you the exam, and you've got to answer all the questions, or they will get angry. And give you a bad grade. So then you always optimize you always answer the question. A lot of the times you should say this is the wrong question.
Right.
In fact, the question is definitely wrong to some degree, just how wrong. And I think just generally taking the approach that your design is some degree wrong, probably a lot more than you think. Your goal is to make it less wrong over time.
Zip2 started off
as basically, like I said, we're trying to figure out how to make enough money to exist as a company, and so since there wasn't really any advertising money being made, we thought we could help existing companies get online, bring their stuff online. So we developed software that helped bring a lot of the newspapers and media companies online, because a lot of them just also didn't know what the internet was.
You had some big customers, didn't you?
Yeah. And even the ones that were aware of the internet didn't have a software, so they weren't very good at developing functionality. So we had, as investors and customers, the New York Times Company, Knight Ridder, Hearst, and so we were able to get them to pay us to develop software for them to bring them online, so online publishing stuff. And we did maps and directions and yellow pages and white pages and various other things. 2008 in particular was awful because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX. The Tesla financing round that we were raising fell apart because the economy was going to tailspin. And it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company, late 2008 when GM and Chrysler are busy going bankrupt. That was tough. And then Solar City had to deal with Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had to renege on the deal because they themselves were running out of money. So it looked like all three companies were going to die, and I was also going through a divorce. So that was definitely a low point. With all that stuff happening, I was getting dumped on massively in the press. That was probably one of the toughest calls I've had to make. Because reserve capital for one company or the other. I mean, fortunately, Solar City didn't need a ton of capital, so they were okay. But between SpaceX and Tesla, it's sort of like you've got two kids, and what do? Do you spend all your money to maximize the probability of success of one, or do you try to keep both alive? Fortunately, it worked.
How, aside from making great products, how do you get people excited about Tesla? There's a lot of people I know and that I talk to who are just intrigued and interested and excited about Tesla as a company.
The thing I really focus on at Tesla is really put all of our money into and attention into trying to make the product as compelling as possible. So, because I think that the way to sell any product is through word of mouth. So if somebody gets the car, they really like it, and actually the key is to have a product that people will love. Yeah. And generally people, if they're at a party or touring with friends or whatever, you'll talk about the things that you love. But if you just like something, it's okay. You're not going to care that much. We don't spend any money on advertising or endorsements, so anyone buys our car, they just bought it because they like the car.
Zip2 happened, you sold it, and
and bought the McLaren, yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you invested most of that money into your next venture, X.com.
That's right. Most of the funds went into X.com, which was later renamed PayPal. That worked out pretty well.
It worked out pretty well, but looking back on it, because you put a lot of your eggs in that basket, would you advise entrepreneurs to roll the bones quite the way you did?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think it's worth investing your own capital in what you do. I don't believe in the sort of other people's money thing. I think if you're not willing to put your own assets at stake, then you shouldn't ask other people to do that. We don't think too much about what competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's important to be just focused on making the best possible products. It's sort of maybe analogous to what they say about if you're in a race.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what the other runners are doing.
Yeah.
Just run.